Welcome back to Where Yellows Walk. Oxford United will be back in England playing football this weekend at the Castad against Bristol Rovers in a pre-season friendly. But before that, Con and I are back to talk about a few small things that have happened in between. Con, I'm pretty excited to see the boys back live. Are you?
I am, yeah. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see all two signings that we've brought into the building, Sam. Uh, excited against two massive games, big games, Mansfield Town and Bristol Rovers. No disrespect intended.
Yes, as you mentioned, Mansfield we played the day after this record, so hopefully by the some of you will be watching this on your way to Mansfield. But just our luck on that, after we recorded the last podcast, two things happened in the world of Oxford United. We're going to touch on the two departures that have happened since last time. First, that being Will Goodwin has joined Colchester United on loan. And it's also been disclosed that he will not be able to play in the EFL Cup game that Oxford have against Colchester in a couple of weeks' time. Obviously, Will Goodwin's loan at Wigan did not go to plan at all. He's got injured very, very early in that loan spell. And this is a very, very important season for him, isn't it?
It is absolutely. 'Cause as far as I remember, he came on quite a hefty figure.
Yeah.
Transfer that he came in, and and I think that Cheltenham Town fans themselves were quite chuffed at the fee that was reported that we paid for him, and we expected him to hit the ground running, which he never did. I think he still has a fair amount of fans to win over, if that's fair.
Yeah.
But I think that we could see that he's a physical presence. He can put himself about, but his biggest problem, like a fair few strikers we've had in the past, just his injury record, it's absolutely atrocious. It's horrible, which is, every single body is different, and they're going to adapt differently to the pressures that come with professional football. Unfortunately, Will Goodwin just seems to be beset by injury every single season, it seems, unfortunately. So I'm I do like the fact that he's gone to Colchester, because I'm a big fan of the Cowley brothers and the way that they play football. If Colchester managed to keep him injury free in League Two, there is no reason why he will not be hitting double figures for goals in the season. That's a prediction for him anyway.
Yeah.
I expect him to have a pivotal part in that, because I think that Colchester will have quite a good season at League Two this season.
Oh, interesting prediction. Yeah, like you say, Will Goodwin, he was signed for like 400k, and really we bought him off half a season's worth of performances. And I mean, one of those performances was against us, so it's not always great to sign a player that's played good in one game against you. Like you say, everybody's different, but he's not been lucky with injuries at all. And yeah, 100% on board with everything you said there. And again, I agree with, in the sense, the Cowleys, obviously it turned bad at Portsmouth, obviously, towards the end, but there was a lot of love for those two at Portsmouth. So, they clearly know how to get a fan base behind them, and the players were also, I believe, quite fond of those two. So, yeah, like you say, hopefully Will Goodwin can have at least, if he doesn't score goals, just consistent minutes under his belt. That would be kind of probably the best thing for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we've also got one more that left the building, didn't we, in Jordan Thornley to Northampton Town.
Yeah, this is a super interesting one. Obviously, Jordan Thornley is kind of frozen out of the of Oxford United, probably after the 6-1 battering at the hands of Coventry in the Cup. No, 6-2, wasn't it? We lost Coventry in the FA Cup 2 seasons ago. That was his kind of last major contribution in Oxford shirt. Then obviously, due to a bit of a centre-back injury crisis, he gets dragged on in the first half against Plymouth, and gets the pre-assist with a beautiful ball over the top to Harris. And I think he then played against Preston, I think.
Yeah, he came on against Preston, and he actually put a decent shift in. I thought he was quite impressive against Preston, if I'm honest. He had quite a good game there. But yeah, I think that, let's be honest, we have a lot of depth now in the back line and at centre-half position. And I think that Thornley was going to elbow his way in. So this was just a deal that worked best for both parties. I think that it's a decent signing for Northampton Town, and Kevin Nolan is there having a bit of a churn and a rebuild. And I think just getting minutes and playing football, and Northampton is local to Oxford, so it's not as if he's having to pack up and move anywhere. Long term, it's a season-long loan. I expect him to get a lot of regular minutes. So I think it's something that works for both parties. And if anything, if he does well at the end of the season, let's be honest, I don't think that we're going to expect him to be staying on at Oxford, are we?
No, so it was brought up by Liam Rice of the Oxford Mail that Jordan Thornley is out of contract at the end of this season. And yeah, I don't see Gary Rowett or the club taking that up. So, it's obviously, he's brought back to the club after an incredible 6-month spell he had with us a couple of years ago. We were hoping for something similar, but I mean, I will maintain, especially after the couple of performances he had in the Championship last season, that he's much more of he's the type of defender who's much more suited to the Championship than League One. As odd as that sounds, it's just something about the way football is played at League One level, which meant he struggled a little bit, and he was, the evidence is there that he was much better in League One. In the Championship. It's one of those really weird things of football. But like you say, we've got a lot of depth now in the back line with Oxford's newest signing. Sorry lads, another one from Huddersfield. Oxford United signed 21-year-old Northern Ireland international Brodie Spencer for what's believed to be about £1 million. So we've now got two of Northern Ireland's internationals in our backline, and also two of Huddersfield's centre-backs from last season. Con, you're the EFL expert here. Give us the rundown on Brodie Spencer and what we can expect to see from him.
Sure. Very quickly, just going a bit off piece, do you think Oxford United are the reason why Huddersfield are getting Alfie May, that we're funding their transfer of Alfie May from Birmingham City? Not that we spent on Hellick and reportedly Brodie Spencer. But
I mean, they're doing a lot of business in this window. There's links to Mark Leonard on loan from Birmingham as well. So they're very much. I think they want to get out of League One as quick as possible.
Exactly, yeah. But with regards to Brodie Spencer, I quite like this signing. The first fact, just from a purely administrative point of view, he's 21, so he doesn't count to our squad cap. Mm-hmm. I think that he's quite physical. Watching some highlights, quite impressed. And even at the age of 21, if you've already played 14 games for your country, you're doing something right. Mm-hmm. He can play as centre back and also left back. If you're asking me, is he going to be a starter? No, because I think it's very much agreed, and it's just that Jack Curry is going to play on the left. And if he's going to squeeze his way into centre half at this moment in time, unless there's something catastrophic that happens, touchwood, over pre-season, I don't think that he's going to get ahead of Hellick and Brown. However, there is another option, and I think this is a very Gary Rowett signing and strengthening up the back line. That if we lose Jordan Thornley, he's gone. I think that it's not a stretch to say that Brodie Spencer is an upgrade in terms of rotation and depth should we need it. Mm-hmm. I think that with Spencer also being so tall and physical, he's also aggressive when he looks to go forward as well, and he's also not afraid to have a shot either. If you look, there was a particular game last season, I think it was Blackpool 2, Huddersfield 2. If you saw where he took the ball from the halfway line and he was just striding, it reminded me a bit of we had Rob Atkinson, and then he just took the ball and he was just not afraid to go forward, and take a shot, which we need some of those this season because we still haven't got a number 9, but that's on for a different conversation. But yeah, I think that it's a very clever bit of business. I think that I don't expect him to go out on loan, especially if we've paid a significant fee. I think that I'm quite excited to see him, and I'm hoping that it will play either, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe against Bristol Rovers and against our upcoming games against our Spanish opposition. Sam, what do you think? And do you think that is our back line now pretty much sorted, and now that we really need to focus on now attacking areas, i.e. mainly up front in the number 9 position and in number 10?
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting with Brodie Spencer because obviously, it's again reported by Liam Rice of the Oxford Mail that he had a year left on his contract. And The few bits I have seen of him, he's a very, very versatile player. Like you mentioned, he can play right back, left back, and at centre half. Now there has been some speculation. This is mainly off the back of some comments made by BBC Radio Oxford's Jerome Sale, that it's possible he's been brought in to play as a right back. Sam Long will continue in his spell at centre half, and that might lead to Peter Kioso being shipped out. Obviously, Kioso was played at centre half in Indonesia, and Hideo Turaves was the right back favoured by Gary Rowett towards the back end of the campaign. So we'll wait and see how that develops. But I think you're right. This is definitely, I think, the final piece of our defence now in place. And yeah, 100%, you know, we need to be moving on to looking at targets in the forward areas. I know, you know, we talked about this on the last PodCon that, you know, there has been some a lack of patience from our fan base, but I have to admit I'm getting there as well, kind of seeing a lack of anything. We're seeing a lack of rumours. I mean, the most recent one was a link to, I think it was Alfie Whiteman, a 26-year-old goalkeeper who'd just been released by Spurs. That's the only thing we've seen from an Oxford United perspective in terms of any kind of links. So, you know, it's absolutely vital that we try and get someone in the door. You know, it's not going to be for Mansfield, but maybe for Bristol Rovers, because, you know, as we'll go to talk about, it appears the Indonesia tour hasn't been as good for our preparations for this season as maybe we would have hoped.
Yeah, that's true. I'm still not panicking yet. I think that when it gets to, say, by the time we've played Portsmouth and Hull and we still haven't got a striker, that's when I'll start panicking. But in terms of the Indonesia tour, there were some fans online that were saying that it was a complete unmitigated disaster, and that was a lot of hyperbole. That wasn't the case at all. It wasn't a disaster. It would have been a disaster if De Keersmaker broke his leg, which apparently he was very, very lucky to avoid. I'm not sure if you've seen any of the footage. I think that with the tour, this is something that our fan base might have to get used to, and I think unfortunately for Gary Rowett, he might have to get used to if he's going to be here for a couple more seasons, because I don't see this going away anytime soon. Commercially, it's too valuable for the club. I think that the first couple of seasons that the organisers and the club are going to have to go through some growing pains, because it was the first tournament that has been held, I believe, with overseas clubs or Oxford United, and they want to look to grow the tournament. Yeah, I don't think that it was the greatest opposition to prepare against either. You know, no disrespect to Indonesia All-Stars and a team from Indonesia and a team from Thailand, but I don't think that it's exactly like the great preparation games that you want to be going in with, and the conditions as well didn't help either. But that's just, you know, at the moment Indonesia are in their winter, and it's just what you have to cope with being a professional footballer.
Yeah.
So it's here to stay, unfortunately. But as I say, it's going to have growing pains the first couple of years.
Like you say, Tim Williams said before the Port FC final of the President's Cup that it's going to be something that's going to be repeated. Like you say, it's been clearly very good for the commercial side of things and the exposure. A lot of stories from Ox fans that have been out to Indonesia, speaking, you know, people being stopped on the streets, you know, when they're wearing Oxford shirts and all that kind of thing. But like I say, from a purely kind of pre-season preparations point of view, obviously, you know, Indonesia All-Stars and Arema, not great opposition from the Indonesian side of things. Obviously, Arema, it seemed they were just going out there to kick the living daylights out of our players. Obviously led to an injury that has meant that Ole Roman has had to get surgery. I can understand Ole's frustration at the injury and all that kind of thing. Obviously, it wasn't a sending off and all that kind of stuff. Not thrilled with his conduct in terms of commenting on a post where basically he's digging out one of his own coaches.
Yeah, that was poor.
Not a good look. But you can understand it. Like I say, you know, I can understand the frustration at not being a sending off and kind of the foul and all that kind of stuff, given it, you know, it's looking like him and Keersmaker might be out for up to 3 months, which is obviously really not good for our two, you know, biggest signings that we had. And like I say, the conditions really didn't help for the Port FC game either. Again, another game where they just looked to, you know, kick the living daylights out of us. like you said, it is one of these things that the lads are going to have to maybe get used to in the worst possible sense, because they're going over. They are the English team. A lot of them are going to be looking at the big the big showcase attraction almost, aren't they? Kind of this is who everyone's kind of seeing in Indonesia.
Yeah, I think especially if Romney and Marcelino are there, because
Yeah.
there's still, I think that Romney was putting in a few decent performances come the end of the season. People coming around to the fact that maybe he's actually a decent player and he's not just a PR signing. But the pendulum seems to have swung a little bit back towards the fact that he might have been a PR signing, given that his face is literally plastered everywhere in Indonesia to do with football.
Yeah.
But just for what it's worth, Sam, I know that you said that you love him, but I don't think that Romney was going to get much of a sniff in the starting 11s come the start of the season anyway. But it just adds to added unnecessary or unexpected problems now for Ed Waldron and Gary Rowett to go out and find yet more cover for wide and forward positions.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, Rowett said that he believes they're maybe a week behind everyone else. So the upcoming 4 pre-season friendlies against Mansfield tomorrow, as at the time of recording, as we mentioned, on Saturday against Bristol Rovers at the Castad, and then 3 days after against Leganes of Spain and Malaga on Saturday the 2nd of August. All going to be very important, obviously not just for building up fitness, but to make sure there's things are working as we're hoping, because obviously that things are a little bit disjointed at the back end of the campaign against some of the opposition around us. I'm thinking of Hull, obviously Cardiff. Those are opposition that our performances against those sides needs to improve. So hoping that games against CD Leganes and Malaga are going to be decent tests in terms of making sure for the sides around us we can actually put in the kind of performance we did against the bigger sides like Sheffield United and Sunderland, obviously at the back end of the campaign.
Yeah, I think that especially coming up against foreign opposition. I know that we've already had it in Indonesia, but now that a lot of fans can actually go to the games and see, let's not be around the bush here, Leganes and Malaga are far better teams than Indonesia All-Stars and Port FC. So it's going to be... And Leganes, were they in La Liga last season? Did they get relegated from La Liga last season?
Yes, if I remember rightly, they got relegated last season. Obviously, a lot...
And then I believe...
As usually happens with sides when they drop down from La Liga, a lot of exodus from that club that's still fair number of decent players in their side.
Yeah, and I believe that Malaga, I think they might have got promoted from the 3rd division either last season or the season before that. But anyway, 2nd division side in Spain is still going to be stern test, and it's going to be good to see at the moment, if we're just assuming, which will be a little bit concerning, we assume that will just be the squad that we have at the moment. I'm also be interested to see in the flesh a bit more of the youth teams that's going out there, like Josh Johnson. I think he's a very exciting prospect for the future, so I'll be excited to see more of the young kids if Gary Rowett is looking to put any of them out there at this moment in time. You're going to go to any? I think that the only one that I'm probably going to get to is Leganes. I'm not sure about Bristol Rovers at the weekend. Very, very, very peculiar that the lower division side is coming to, a massive side in the Championship.
Yeah, I mean, I've got tickets for all 3 games. Whether I'll actually go to all 3 is another matter entirely. I might end up handing off to a mate. But it's certainly. I think the thing for me is just kind of getting the feeling of being back at the Castad for football. Obviously, we're all planning for our Sunday trip to Hull in a couple of weeks as well, as tickets came out today. So we're well and truly back in the madness of the football season. Carl, before we sign off, any final thoughts on anything we've spoken about today?
No, got it all covered. I'm sure that we'll be back. We'll be back either next Thursday or Friday, when we learn about what's going on with the future of our football club and a certain little plot of land north of Oxford.
Yes,
I think that's where a lot of our headspace will be between now and then.
Absolutely, that supposed ancient woodland. Good
ancient woodlands.
Good final attempt there, FOSB. We can see your desperation there, lads. But yes, as Con said, we'll be back next week for the very, very important emergency pod on the future of our football club. Look, like we said, just enjoy, these couple friendlies, because, these are the only no pressure games we're going to have this season. Thank you so much for watching, folks, and we'll see you next week for, like we said, the emergency pod about the stadium.